I remember that morning like it was yesterday, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the aroma of toast in our big kitchen. There I was, nose deep in the newspaper, oblivious to everything around me. I'd set out breakfast for one, and in the background, I could hear the kids laughing and chatting, breaking the morning quiet. Ryan, my eldest, came into the kitchen with a picture he'd drawn at school. Bless his heart, he was only 12, but he was so proud of that drawing. He asked me to look at it, his face lit up like a Christmas tree. But I barely glanced up from my paper, let out a heavy sigh, and told him I was too busy. I can still see the smile fading from his face as he put the picture on the edge of the table. Then there was little Morgan, all of 6 years old, struggling with her shoelaces. She looked up at me with those big, hopeful eyes and asked for help. I sighed again, told her she was old enough to do it herself, and went back to my paper. As I rushed out the door for work, all I left behind was the sound of the kids comforting each other and playing. Looking back now, I realize our house was missing a mother's warmth. Those poor children were trying to survive, always reaching for love and attention that seemed just out of grasp.
In Connie's spacious home, the sounds of life filled every corner, a stark contrast to the coldness of Abigail's house. Here, Ryan and Morgan found the warmth they couldn't get from their mother, with their grandmother caring for them and showing interest in their lives. Connie's silver hair was always neatly arranged, and she was like the sun at the center of the house. Her kitchen was a place where everyone was drawn to its warmth. "Grandma, I made this at school today," Ryan rushed over to show her his new drawing. He knew that here, unlike at his mother's house, his efforts would be recognized and praised. Connie looked at the picture with genuine admiration. "Ryan, this is wonderful. You've captured the sky so beautifully. Let's put this on the fridge so everyone can see it," she said proudly, filling the boy's heart with joy. Morgan had finally learned to tie her shoelaces, thanks to her grandmother's patience. She approached with a book, saying, "Grandma, can you read me a story? I chose this book because it has a princess who's strong and brave like you." Connie smiled. "Of course, my dear. Sit here. Remember, you have wonderful strength just like the princess in the story. Don't ever forget that," she said, opening the book and beginning to read. The day at Connie's house passed filled with laughter, stories, and the smell of freshly baked cookies. It was a true home, a place where Ryan and Morgan could be free from the worries of having their mother around and just be children. At night, before bed, Connie gathered them for prayers, a moment of quiet and reflection. "Let's be thankful for being together, for this day, and for everything we've learned. No matter what happens outside, there's always a home and love here," Connie whispered as she kissed their foreheads. Connie's house wasn't just a shelter, but a school of life where Ryan and Morgan learned about values, respect, and love. On a sunny Saturday, Connie decided it was a good day for an outdoor lesson under the old tree in the backyard, its branches spreading out as if to embrace them. "Come, children, today we're going to plant a new tree," Connie said, holding 2 small shovels. "Each of you will help. This is how we leave our legacy for the future. Taking care of each other and this earth will be a reminder that we're all connected." Ryan took a shovel, asking curiously, "Grandma, why is planting a tree so important?" Connie answered with a wise smile. "A tree is like a family, Ryan. It grows, provides shade, bears fruit, and creates life around it. Just like our family, it's important to the world." Morgan excitedly began digging a small hole, her little hands covered in dirt. "I promise to take care of this tree every day. I'll water it and give it everything it needs to grow strong," she said, looking to her grandmother for approval. "That's wonderful, Morgan. Taking care of something with love teaches us about the importance of life and all it brings us," Connie said as she helped plant the young tree in the prepared hole. As they worked together, Connie shared stories from her own childhood, teaching through her experiences about the importance of patience, kindness, and empathy. "Life brings us trials, my dears. But how we face these trials determines who we are. Like this tree will endure storms and strong winds, our strength and character will be tested. But with love and support, we can overcome anything. At the end of the afternoon, after planting and watering the new tree, the siblings sat in the shade of the big tree, reflecting on the day's lessons. They had not just planted a tree, but had laid the foundation for understanding deeper concepts of life, the importance of family, and care for the world around them.
From my glass-walled office, the city skyline stretching out before me. There I was, buried in paperwork, when the phone rang, shattering the silence. It was about a problem with yesterday's project that needed immediate attention. Without missing a beat, I told them to give me an hour, promising to find a solution. After hanging up, I started talking to myself, like I always do when I'm stressed. "You can do this, Abigail," I said. "You've always succeeded. Just focus and don't let anything distract you." Not for a second. Then I caught myself thinking, if only I didn't have to worry about the kids, I wouldn't be so swamped. It's always when I need time the most that they demand my attention. I felt a pang of guilt as soon as the thought crossed my mind. During the video conference with my team, I took charge, asking for ideas to improve efficiency and cut costs. As I listened to their suggestions, I found myself thinking out loud, pushing for bolder ideas and calculated risks. After the meeting, I stood by the window, staring at the horizon. For a moment, I let doubt creep in. Is all this effort really worth it? Am I doing this for the right reasons? But I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. Of course it's right, I told myself. I've never been wrong before. As I prepared for my next task, I caught myself justifying more time at the office. The kids can wait a little longer, I thought. Mom's taking good care of them. By the end of the day, I was checking off items on my to-do list, feeling both satisfied and overwhelmed. Another day down, Abigail, I said to myself. You've moved mountains, but there are still so many more to climb. Before leaving the office, I paused to look around the empty space. This office, these papers, this computer, they're my fortress and my prison, I whispered, acknowledging the irony of my success. The golden light of the setting sun washing over my office as I shut down my computer and tidied up my papers. It was like a brief respite from the rat race, but I knew it wouldn't last. Time to pick up the kids from Mom's, I muttered to myself, grabbing my car keys and bag. She's probably fit to be tied by now. The drive to Mom's house was as familiar as the back of my hand, but it always stirred up a hornet's nest of feelings I'd rather not poke at. I took a deep breath before getting out of the car, eyeing the well-kept garden surrounding the old family home. Just a few more minutes and I'll be in bed, dead to the world until tomorrow, I told myself, trying to gear up for the shift from corporate warrior to mom. Mom greeted me with a look that was equal parts worry and reproach. She told me I was late and the kids had already eaten dinner. I explained about the meeting running over, keeping my voice level to avoid a dust-up. As I headed to the living room where the kids were playing, I overheard Mom trying to smooth things over with them. She was telling them I'd just been finishing up important work. Ryan, my oldest, looked at me with a mix of hope and resignation that darn near broke my heart. He asked if I could make it to his soccer game that weekend, his voice full of hope. I hesitated for a split second before telling him I'd try my best to be there. Then Morgan came up with a picture she'd drawn for me at school. She held it out, asking what I thought of it. I took the drawing and plastered on a smile, feeling like the world's worst mom. One morning, the weight of my choices pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. As I made breakfast for the kids, I could feel my mom's disapproval and Ryan's disappointment hanging in the air. I tried to connect with them, telling Ryan to have a good day and to call me after school if anything came up. Bless their hearts, they responded cautiously but optimistically to my attempts to bridge the gap. Ryan, still smarting from my missed game, just nodded. Morgan, sweet thing, gave me a big hug before leaving, telling me to have a good day at work. She had no idea about the storm raging in my heart. At the office, surrounded by the familiar trappings of my work life, I tried to focus. But Alexander's proposal kept echoing in my head, stirring up a hornet's nest of emotions. The temptation of it all just wouldn't quit, buzzing around in my mind like a fly you can't swat away. Then the phone rang, breaking the monotony of the day. It was Alexander, his voice full of enthusiasm and conviction. He started talking about us starting a company together somewhere new, free from all the pressure and expectations. He painted a picture of us building something meaningful, not just for ourselves but for the world. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling a spark of hope I'd been afraid to acknowledge. I told him it sounded tempting, but it was a big change, and what about my kids? He understood it was a big decision, but he urged me to consider the possibilities, the freedom. He suggested we could plan carefully, not make any rash decisions. Then he dropped the bombshell: he'd be waiting outside my house at 9 that night. If I accepted his proposal, I should pack my bags and come with him. When I heard those words, I felt like I was about to jump off a cliff. Alexander's words had stirred up a storm inside me, offering a chance to fill the emptiness I'd been feeling. The promise of a fresh start, away from everyone's expectations, was pulling me like a magnet. That day at work had passed in a blur, my mind floating in a sea of possibilities. As I packed my bags that evening, each item felt like a tie I was about to cut. I kept telling myself I couldn't live a life that didn't feel like my own anymore. Writing that letter to the kids was like squeezing out drops of my soul, each phrase trying to explain the unexplainable. After sealing the letter, I moved around the apartment like a ghost, packing what I needed. When I was done, I took one last look around. This place that had been my home now felt like a cocoon I had to shed. I took a deep breath and closed the door behind me with a quiet but decisive click. The world outside was oblivious to the magnitude of this moment. Alexander hadn't arrived yet, and I was caught between anxiety and excitement. I questioned if I was doing the right thing, but I knew there was no turning back now. Just then, Mom appeared out of nowhere, looking at me with confusion. She told me to come inside, saying it was cold out and I wasn't even wearing a coat. The sound of Alexander's car approaching, making my decision all too real. I looked at Mom, my eyes brimming with tears, and asked her to take care of the kids. I told her she'd do a better job than I ever could, and that I was off to live my own adventure, away from all the mistakes I'd made in this life. I said I hoped the kids would forgive me someday. Then I got into the car, leaving Mom standing there, crying, abandoned by her daughter who only thought of herself and left with a man she barely knew. As we drove away, Alexander tried to comfort me, saying the pain would pass soon and we'd be swimming in success before we knew it. I asked him to just let me cry for a while, admitting that leaving Mom and the kids had been hard. With each mile, I felt myself moving further from my past and closer to an uncertain future. As dawn broke, painting the sky with the first light of a new day, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I'd left behind not just my old life, but the version of myself everyone expected me to be. Our journey to the new city was filled with quiet reflection and dreamy conversations about the future. Alexander broke the silence, his voice full of excitement as he talked about all the possibilities ahead of us. He asked what I thought about it all. I told him I was terrified and excited all at once, that if someone had asked me a few months ago if I'd do this, I'd have said they were crazy. But here I was, and I couldn't wait to see what was waiting for us. When we arrived in the new city, we settled into a modest apartment with a view of the ocean. As we unpacked, the reality of our new situation started to sink in. Alexander commented on how we were starting a new life with just a few suitcases. I agreed, saying it felt liberating but also made me realize how fragile it all was. We were here, building from scratch in this new place. It was terrifying but also incredibly exciting. As I looked around the small space we now called home, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd made the right decision. The golden sunlight pouring into our tiny apartment that was now both home and office. There was a buzz of anticipation in the air as we started another day of building our fledgling company. I was looking over the marketing plan I'd put together, feeling like it was bursting with potential. Alexander was already on the phone, wrestling with one business challenge or another. When I thought the time was right, I approached him with my ideas about focusing more on digital strategies and leveraging social media. But bless his heart, he barely looked up from his computer screen, telling me we'd talk about it later. I felt my frustration rising like a tide. It seemed like my ideas and contributions were always getting pushed to the back burner. I tried to pull him into the conversation, explaining how my suggestions could help us reach a wider audience and cut costs. Alexander tried to smooth things over, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. As time went on, the differences between us became clearer than a bell. I started feeling like my ideas weren't being given their due, and the initial excitement of building something together was turning into frustration. During a rare quiet moment at dinner, I decided it was high time to address the elephant in the room. I told Alexander I felt like he wasn't really hearing me, that I had ideas that could really help our company. He seemed surprised by my seriousness and finally started to listen. He apologized, saying he'd been so focused on making the business work that he'd forgotten to listen to me. This time, when I explained my vision for our marketing strategy, he was all ears. One afternoon, Alexander and I were discussing the company's direction, and I was full of hope, ready to propose some innovative ideas. But before I could even finish my thought, he cut me off. He told me I didn't understand the main point, that my ideas were too simple. His voice was dripping with irritation and contempt, and it hit me like a slap in the face. I tried to defend myself, saying I was just trying to help, that I believed in my vision. But Alexander wasn't having any of it. He told me to focus on what I could actually do and leave the strategy to him. His words were cold and disrespectful, and they cut deep. It wasn't just about our business partnership anymore. I started questioning my whole decision to leave everything behind. That night, alone in my room, his words kept echoing in my head. I couldn't help but wonder how I'd been so wrong about him, about us. The reality of my situation was becoming painfully clear. I'd thrown away my life and my kids for a promise of happiness that now seemed like a distant mirage. I felt trapped in a life I didn't recognize, questioning not just my future with Alexander, but my ability to make decisions at all. The courage that had driven me to this new beginning now seemed like foolishness. I whispered to myself that I needed to get out of this situation. In the midst of my pain, a cold resolution started to form. I knew I couldn't let this become my life. Alexander was waiting for me at the office, his face a mask of contempt. He told me our relationship wasn't working out, not at home or at work. He said I was no longer useful to the company and he was cutting me out of the business. I was floored, my anger and indignation boiling over. I told him he couldn't do that, that I'd invested money in this company too, and had a right to its fruits. But Alexander wasn't having any of it. He threatened to expose me as an irresponsible mother if I fought him legally. It was a low blow, and it hit me right where it hurt. A year later, I found myself scraping by, barely able to afford food. I'd gone from being one of the most successful engineers in the industry, to cleaning houses. Every day, I'd come home to my tiny apartment and wonder how I'd fallen so far. I'd been lured by the promise of freedom, only to end up in this nightmare. Alexander had taken everything we'd built together, leaving me with nothing but regret and endless struggle. The silence in my apartment was deafening as I made my tea, thinking about how I'd become a monster who abandoned her family. I'd thought running away with Alexander was the right decision, but all I'd found was disappointment and loneliness. For 10 long years, I carried that regret with me, bouncing from one low-paying job to another. But on my birthday, I decided enough was enough. I took out a loan, bought a ticket, and headed back to the city I'd run away from, determined to find my children and my mother. When I arrived at my old apartment building, I asked the manager about my family, but his answer left me shocked. He said that he'd never heard of my family. But then, a glimmer of hope sparked in my mind, and I found myself in a taxi, heading to my mother's house. My heart was pounding like a drum as I knocked on the door, expecting to see Mom's face, ready for the scolding of a lifetime. But life's funny that way, always throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. It was Ryan who opened the door, all grown up and looking at me like I was a ghost from the past. His eyes filled with tears, and I could see a storm of emotions brewing behind them. He asked me why I'd come back after all this time, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't missed their entire childhood. I felt about 2 inches tall, standing there with my tail between my legs. I tried to explain, but how do you explain abandoning your children? Ryan let me in, and there was Morgan, busy with her college work. When she saw me, her face lit up like a Christmas tree, and she hugged me tight. It was like a balm for my battered soul, but Ryan's words brought me crashing back down to earth. He suggested we all sit down and talk, and let me tell you, it was a doozy of a conversation. Ryan started by telling me how my mother had covered for me, saying I was away on business. She'd hidden my letter, believing I'd come back someday. Morgan continued the story. Yes, but we all realized that after the first 2 years. I didn't want to upset Grandma, so I played along with the story. 4 years after you left us, she passed away. The doctors said it was a natural death, but looking back, I think she lived a somewhat happy life. Only Ryan and I attended her funeral. She had very few friends and was a modest woman. After her death, we moved here and discovered a farewell letter she had left behind. As Morgan finished speaking, tears began to flow from my eyes. With red-rimmed eyes, I spoke words of regret. All I can say is that I hope you'll forgive me. I was selfish. I followed the same path your father did when he abandoned me. I chased after meaningless dreams and left you behind, and even those dreams never materialized. As a result, I lost my career, the time I could have spent with you, and my mother. I couldn't even attend her funeral because I was desperately trying to hold my own life together. Ryan seemed to sense my regret as his mother, and he offered words of comfort. Mom, it was a long road to get here. Your actions were certainly wrong for us. Your absence created a big void. But that void taught me resilience. It showed me how to find opportunities where I least expected them. I wished you had been here, but it shaped me. I earned a degree in civil engineering and started a major firm just like you wanted. Now, I have many clients. The inspiration came from you. And I forgive you, Mom. Morgan continued. Mom, it's been a long time since we last saw each other. During that time, I had to learn a lot on my own, about myself too. Now, I'm in medical school, fulfilling Grandma's dream. She couldn't achieve it, but I took it on. It hurt not to have you, but what lies ahead is more important. So, I forgive you too. With tears streaming down my face, I listened to their words. Thank you, I whispered with a mix of gratitude and relief. I felt the depth of my children's forgiveness. I'm truly proud of hearing about your lives and who you've become. It's a pity I couldn't be part of it, but despite being lost, you found me. From now on, I promise to be here for you. I will repair what's broken and, as long as you forgive me, I'll be part of your lives. The conversation continued through the night, mixing tears, laughter, memories, and plans for the future. It was the beginning of long healing and rebuilding family bonds, but for me, it was a moment of hope after many years. Despite past mistakes, the love between me and my children had bridged the turbulent waters of life. In the days that followed, I made every effort to blend into Ryan and Morgan's lives. I was amazed by the depth of their achievements and their passion for their respective careers. Seeing Ryan's successful civil engineering firm and Morgan's dedication to her medical studies moved me deeply. On a sunny day, Ryan invited me to his office. When I arrived, he welcomed me warmly. "Mom, everything I have now, I achieved on my own. But I don't want to do it alone anymore. I want you to join me. By combining my resources and your experience, we could elevate the work even further. What do you think?" I was filled with joy. I realized I was not only getting a chance to be with my children but also to return to the work I loved. It was a true love, the pure love between a mother and her children. "It's wonderful to work together, Ryan," I replied with a beaming smile. Now, family gatherings became frequent, and surrounded by my children in the warm atmosphere of our newly bought home, I realized how far we had come. I shared my gratitude, tears flowing. Having everyone here and seeing what we've built together is more than I ever dreamed of. I want to spend as much time as possible to make up for lost time. Although the scars of the past may never fully disappear, the love and forgiveness you've shown me have given me a new lease on life. We can move toward a new purpose together. I am deeply grateful for this second chance.
If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to bring you more touching stories. Look forward to the next amazing story coming your way soon. Thank you so much for your support. See you next time.